Jogo. Jogo is a special grade cursed spirit whose existence is tied to humanity's fear of fire-based natural disasters and the violent instability of the Earth itself. Volcanoes, eruptions, earthquakes, and the idea that the ground can suddenly become a furnace. That's why his cursed energy output is so extreme and so hot in presentation. Even before he uses name techniques, his presence reads like a heat wave, and his attacks behave like condensed catastrophes rather than normal projectiles. In the Disaster Curse lineup, he is the most straightforward representation of raw destructive force. His curse technique revolves around volcanic phenomena, magma, flames, and explosive pressure. Instead of needing elaborate setups, Jogo can create lethal zones instantly, using attacks that either blanket an area or detonate on contact. Conceptually, he fights like a disaster event. You don't outmuscle a volcano. You survive it by escaping the radius or neutralizing it before it fully triggers. That's why he's deadly to groups, and why even competent sorcerers treat him as an emergency threat. His kit is built to erase space, not duel politely.
一人目二人目
Jogo's domain expansion, Coffin of the Iron Mountain, is the purest expression of his theme. It forces opponents into a sealed environment that resembles a volcanic interior, where heat and magma become unavoidable conditions of survival. In domain logic, this is crucial. A domain is not just a stronger attack, it is an enforced reality, where the user's technique gains certainty. Jogo's domain makes volcanic death feel inevitable because it removes the normal distance and terrain advantages that keep people alive.
領域展開外観敵戦
Personality-wise, Jogo is driven by a militant ideology about curses. He sees cursed spirits as the true humans and treats humanity as a species that deserves replacement, which is why he aligns with plans that destabilize society. At the same time, Jogo's arc is defined by a brutal mismatch between how powerful he is on paper and the level of opponents he ends up facing. That contrast is intentional. It shows how high the ceiling is in the series, because Jogo can be a walking catastrophe and still be outclassed by the top tiers. Jogo is eventually killed during the Shibuya Incident after Sukuna is fully reawakened into a temporary incarnation. Despite unleashing his maximum output and fighting with everything he has, Jogo is completely outmatched in speed, power, and technique mastery. Sukuna incinerates him effortlessly, using the encounter to demonstrate the absolute gap between a disaster curse and a true calamity-level being. Hanami. Hanami is a special grade curse born from humanity's fear and guilt toward nature, especially the fear that the natural world will eventually retaliate. Unlike Jogo's instant annihilation, Hanami represents disaster as something that spreads, suffocates, and outlasts you. Forests don't explode, they overtake. Vines don't end a fight in 1 second. They restrict movement until the opponent can't breathe or act. That's why Hanami's combat style emphasizes endurance, suppression, and battlefield control. Hanami's curse technique is plant-based and is built around turning the environment into a hostile ecosystem. His attacks commonly create roots, branches, and growths that bind targets, block lines of sight, and reshape terrain so that movement becomes costly. This does two things tactically. It reduces the opponent's ability to dodge, and it forces them into predictable paths. Against sorcerers who rely on spacing, momentum, or formation, Hanami's kit is designed to collapse those advantages by making the arena itself an enemy. Hanami is capable of using domain expansion, Shining Sea of Growing Branches, a technique where his cursed energy manifests as a fully formed domain, and the guaranteed hit effect is a concentrated energy beam fired from Hanami's left arm. During the battle against Yuji Itadori and Aoi Todo, Hanami attempted to activate this domain after charging the flower on his shoulder. The expansion was never completed because the barrier excluding Satoru Gojo was removed, forcing Hanami to abandon the technique mid-activation. Ideologically, Hanami is the most explicitly anti-human in reasoning. He frames humans as parasites destroying the planet. That's why his presence in the story connects disaster fear to environmental anxiety rather than simple violence. Hanami's role is to show that curses don't just represent panic, they can represent long-term resentment, an accumulated weight of negative emotion that becomes a living, intelligent enemy. Hanami is ultimately killed during the Shibuya Incident inside the underground train station. Although Hanami possesses extraordinary durability and endurance, Gojo overwhelms them through sheer cursed energy control and physical force. The curse is crushed beyond its ability to regenerate, proving that even nature-born resilience has a breaking point against overwhelming power. Dagon. Dagon is the disaster curse tied to fear of the ocean, especially the deep-sea horror of drowning, storms, and the sense that something vast and unknowable is beneath you. The sea is a uniquely powerful fear source because it combines scale with helplessness. Even strong swimmers can be swallowed by currents, pressure, or unseen threats. His identity captures that exact feeling, being overwhelmed by an environment that doesn't care how skilled you are. His technique expresses the ocean as both summoning and pressure. Dagon commonly uses attacks themed around marine life and flooding conditions, which matters because it changes the opponent's priorities. Instead of dealing with one attacker, you're dealing with a whole ecosystem of threats. That creates constant distraction, drains stamina, and forces defensive choices that open you up to the real kill options. It's the same logic as the sea itself. It doesn't defeat you with one punch. It defeats you by making every second harder to survive. Dagon's domain expansion, Horizon of the Captivating Skanda, is one of the clearest environmental domains in the series. It recreates an oceanic space where Dagon's threats become natural laws of the area, and where his Shikigami attacks can behave as near inescapable hazards. The terror here isn't just damage, it's the psychological switch from fighting an enemy to fighting a world. Inside the domain, opponents aren't simply under attack. They're trapped in a situation that resembles drowning, limited options, crushing pressure, and no safe footing. Dagon's story purpose is also structural. He demonstrates that the disaster curses aren't all finished products with identical maturity. Some are still evolving into their full threat level. His growth into a more complete form reinforces the idea that cursed spirits can develop, and that a fear concept can become more lethal as it gains self-awareness and confidence. When Dagon finally pushes into true special grade territory, the narrative uses him to raise the stakes and show what a fully realized disaster environment looks like in combat. Dagon is eventually killed during the Shibuya Incident after being overwhelmed at close range by the reawakened Toji Fushiguro inside his own domain expansion. Despite his overwhelming control of the battlefield and summoned attacks, Dagon is unable to respond to the speed and precision of his opponent. He is dismantled in seconds once the power gap becomes unavoidable. Mahito. Mahito is the disaster curse representing humanity's fear of humans. Specifically, the terror that people can destroy each other's bodies, identities, and lives in ways that feel personal and cruel. While the other three embody external forces, Mahito embodies the internal nightmare. The idea that the worst disaster is what another person can choose to do to you. That's why he is thematically the most disturbing. A volcano doesn't hate you. Mahito can. His curse technique, idle transfiguration, is based on direct manipulation of the soul, with the body changing as a consequence. In Jujutsu Kaisen's framework, this is an exceptional kind of threat because it doesn't behave like a normal injury. Cutting an arm is physical damage. Mahito changes what you are, and the body follows. That means traditional durability can become irrelevant, and even healing has limits if the soul's shape has been altered. Mechanically, it's a technique that punishes contact and makes every mistake potentially fatal. Mahito's fighting style is built on experimentation and adaptation. He treats opponents as research material, testing emotional breaking points, learning what triggers panic, and refining how efficiently he can reshape targets. This is another reason he represents human disaster. Real cruelty often escalates through curiosity and practice. Mahito doesn't just want to win, he wants to understand suffering, and that makes him unpredictably dangerous because he evolves mid-conflict. His domain expansion, self-embodiment of perfection, turns his soul manipulation into an enforced certainty. Domains in this series aren't only bigger attacks, they remove the opponent's ability to rely on chance and movement. For Mahito, the domain's meaning is terrifyingly clean. If you are in his space, the act of being touched becomes almost unavoidable, and touch is all he needs. It's the logical endpoint of his concept. Getting too close to the human disaster means your identity can be rewritten instantly. Mahito also serves as a thematic mirror to sorcerers. He argues that humans and curses aren't that different because both can kill and both can rationalize it. The difference is that Mahito embraces that logic fully, without restraint or guilt. That's why he feels like the most personal antagonist among the disaster curses. Jogo burns you, Hanami crushes you, Dagon drowns you, but Mahito changes you. And that violation is what makes him the most psychologically catastrophic of the four. Mahito is eventually killed at the climax of the Shibuya Incident after his confidence, ideology, and sense of superiority completely collapse. Once driven into fear and desperation, Mahito abandons his cruelty and attempts to escape. Yuji corners him, but before he can deliver the final blow, Kenjaku intervenes and seals Mahito, ending the disaster curse born from human hatred and malice.